Hello and good afternoon. Thank you for attending our series of educational training webinars. My name is Katie Durkee and I'm with the Customer Success Department here at Global Software. Your presenter today is my colleague Rebecca Bass, our Senior Implementation and Education Expert. Rebecca has over 13 years of experience in SQL, implementation, and database management, and she's been an instrumental part of the Global Software training team for use with QueryDesigner. Today's webinar is part 3 of our QueryDesigner Back to Basics series. If you've missed either of the previous QueryDesigner webinars, you can find recordings of those sessions along with our other continued education webinars on the Customer Portal section of our website. If you haven't set up your account on the Customer Portal, please contact your Customer Success Executive and they can provide you with the instructions to set up your account. There will be 3 sections to today's webinar as we're covering 3 different query types. We will have a section to cover GEXQ, GEXI, and GEXS queries in QueryDesigner. Due to the amount of material we're covering, we ask that you submit any questions you have via the Q&A box located in the bottom right corner of your screen. We'll try to answer your questions during the training, but in case we don't have a chance to reply or we run out of time, your Customer Success Executive will follow up to provide you with your answers. This session is being recorded and will be available on the Customer Portal in 7 to 10 business days. I will now turn it over to Rebecca for the presentation and demonstration.
Thank you, Katie. The first formula we're going to start off with, as mentioned, is going to be our GEXS. Our GEXS formula is going to be used to allow our users to have a selector window to select values from. So just to show what this is going to look like, I'm starting in cell B3. I'm going to open up my Formula Assistant and select GEXS. Notice here at the top it says opens the selector window with the values returned from the query. So we're going to find our query, which in our case is just countries. There's 2 very important boxes here. We have our selector text. This is the text that's going to show up in Excel. And then we also have our cell for value. Cell for value is where the output of our selector window is going to go. So for selector text, we're just going to say country. That's where we're actually going to be selecting from. And our cell for value is going to be C3, which is going to be the cell next to our formula. So we're going to say insert. Here in Excel, we have the value in B3. It says country. And we have our GEXS formula in the formula bar. So to actually use our GEXS, we're in cell B3, we're going to use the drill down option, and we're going to see a selector window open. The selector window allows our users to come in here and select one or multiple countries. So if we select one, let's say Brazil, and insert, we can see the value of Brazil gets inserted into C3. So that's where we told it to go. If we want to select multiple countries, we can go back to our drill down. Say we want Argentina, we're going to hold down Control. We're going to select Brazil as well as Finland, and then insert. And then we have our 3 values inserted in list format in C3. So we have this query that we created in the QueryDesigner. We go and take a peek at it. This is our countries query. It's very simple. We have a single table with a single field, which is country. 2 things to note here. We have our sort type of ascending. You also notice in our SQL over here to the right, it says we have a distinct query. The distinct query makes sure that we only have a single, each country is only listed one time. So to turn on distinct, we actually use unique rows listed when you right-click on country. So we use our test value here. That's for all records. In our results container, we have our 21 countries to select from. This is the exact same thing that we're seeing in Excel when we drill down on B3. Okay. We also notice up here at the top we have a blank cell under country. This can serve as a filter. Today we are seeing if Ireland is one of our options. We can start typing in Ireland. And as you notice, as we add each additional letter, it filters out our results. And you can always select from here and insert, and we have Ireland. The output of your GEXS can always be used as your parameter for, say, a GEXD. So if we have a table we want our output to go to for our GEXD, we can just create a regular Excel table. Table has headers, and we're just going to name it Orders TBL. Come over here to the side to M2 somewhere out of the way. Go back into our Spreadsheet Server ribbon and select our Formula Assistant once again. So if we have a GEXD, we can select our query of orders. And then we're going to tell it where to put our output. We are on sheet 1. Where do we want it to go? Well, we created our table. We're going to use the name here, Orders TBL. We want to include column headings, and we want to clear our table each time we run our query. Then we notice down here at the bottom for our parameters, we have country. So where's our country on this sheet? The output is going to cell C3. Leave that same cell again, and then insert. Before anything else, we notice here in M2 where our formula is located. Towards the end, we see Ireland, and that is our country that we have in C3. So to populate our table, we're going to use Generate Reports. And then we see the results for Ireland down here at the bottom. This also works if we select multiple countries. Say we want Canada and Mexico. Do Canada, hold down Control, and Mexico, insert our values, and Generate Reports again. And we have Canada and Mexico. Make our date column a little bit wider there. So our first formula here that we're focusing on is the GEXS. We put the formula in cell B3. We use our formula assistant. We gave the selector text the value of country. So that's what we see in Excel. And then the cell for value is C3. That's where we're going to send our output once we select our country. All right. Are there any questions on the GEXS at this point?
Yes, we do have a couple of quick questions.
Okay.
One of the questions is, can we put the formulas in the GEXD in a different sheet than the output table?
Of course. So if we were to just create a new sheet, say we called it Formula, go to our Formula Assistant, GEXD, then Query Orders. Our sheet, we're going to be on sheet 1. That's where our table is located. Our table is Orders TBL. We want to include our column headings. We still want to clear our table. Very important right here for our parameters. If our parameter is still going to be on sheet 1, we need to specify that along with the cell. So we have our sheet 1, exclamation point, and then we are in C3. We go and insert. We see the same formula here. Also notice that here towards the end we have our 2 countries that were listed in our GEXS. If we remove our formula from M2, let's just go back to our formula. We want to run just the selected one. We could always use the option from the bottom half of Generate Reports to run selected GEXD formula. We can go back to sheet 1. And we have Canada and Mexico just as before. And to see this again, if we wanted to select a different country, say we just want to see Brazil, and select Brazil and insert. And we could always run all of our GEXDs if we don't want to go back to the Formula tab. And we have just the results for Brazil. So one thing to note about that, if you're moving your formulas to a different tab, once again, it's all just a matter of telling it where to go and where to look. So right here where it says Worksheet Sheet 1, that's where your output's going. And then where on that sheet is Orders TBL. And then our parameters, they're also on Sheet 1 in cell C3. Okay.
Great, thank you. We do have another somewhat related question, and I think you just touched on it, but the question is, does the user create the parameter screen?
All right, so our parameter screen here in B3, where we drill down, these values are all being populated from our query that we created in the QueryDesigner. So if we had a different query that we were using and we referenced it, those are the values we would see in Excel. So it's all populated off of that query.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
We've got one other question.
Okay.
How does the query know which column is used to populate the GEXS result?
Okay, so in our query, in our case, we just have a single field here of country. So if we had multiple fields in our query here, it would all be dependent on which fields are visible and what order they're in. So remember, when you're building your query, you know, just as we've seen before, if you come in here and for all records, however your column order is here at the top, that's based off of the fields that you have listed here at the bottom. So if we had, I mean, it's not going to make a lot of sense for this example here, but say we had postal code or something else. Whatever field you have, that's what the query is going to look at. And then the first field is the only one that actually gets inserted into our Excel window. And if you look, actually in Excel, if we go and run our drill down here, it's a little reminder here at the top. Only the first column of selected data will be inserted into the formula. So if you had a larger query, maybe you had like a product ID and product names. So you're trying to help your users out a little bit with product names. You know, you could have multiple columns like that, but that first column is the only one that's going to get inserted.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
That's all of the questions we have for now.
Okay. All right, so one more thing about the GEXS before we go on to a GEXQ. If we're over here in our query, all right, and we decided this is going to be a query that we're going to use on a regular basis. We want our users to have access to the results so they actually can populate results themselves without always having to put in the GEXS formula. So we could do that by saving our query to the Explorer folder. So to simply do that, you would open up the purple globe, go to Save As. We go to our main queries folder. You know, if you're at the top, it says Explore. If you go in there, you already have a sample that was saved, Northwind Companies. And we're just going to save our country's query there as well. So query is saved. We go back into Excel and refresh our queries. Say we were here in D3 and wanted to bring in a different formula there. We could go under our lookup. You notice we have RB countries. If we said Denmark, it's going to insert a value. And then you don't have the actual formula itself here in Excel. One thing to note about that, though, is that, you know, when we actually have the formula, the users can use your drill down and keep populating the same cell. If you're just going to use the Explorer folder, you're going to have to use lookup, select your query, and then select your country. So it's all based off of user preference, how you're going to be using the results for your query to populate your data.
Great, and we've had another question come in regarding the Explorer folder. Can you change the location of the Explorer folder?
I wouldn't suggest doing that. The way the product works, it knows to look for the Explorer folder from your lookup. So if you go and move it, it might not know exactly where to find those queries at.
Okay, and one more before we move on to the next query type. For the GEXS value, if you want all values, do you highlight all to select all, or do you just leave it blank?
All right, great question there. So if we wanted to use our drill down from D3, we could select first one, hold down Shift, go all the way down to Venezuela in this case, and insert. We have a whole list. Or you could leave it blank, or you always could use asterisk. So all three of those are going to give you the same result, and they will give you all countries in this case. There's a little bit of flexibility in there. Some of that's user preference as well. Do you actually want to see each country listed out in C3, or do you just want to know, hey, this is everything?
All right, great. I think that's it for now.
All right, thanks. Okay, so our next query we're going to talk about is GEXQ. GEXQ, Q I like to say stands for quantity, single value. You can always drill down on your single value to see the details that make up that value. So if we want to take a look at this query here, we're going to look at our invoices query. So this is just a regular query here. We have a single table once again of invoices, several fields listed here at the bottom. GEXQs you actually have to turn on. So to turn on GEXQs, we're just going to select our fields. In this case, we're just going to use product name. You can right click. GEXQ is our third option here, summary field. And we want counts. Notice this is a text field. Somewhat makes a lot of sense in this case. So count, we're just going to see how many records we have based off of product name. So we can hit save. In our test value here at the top, we have USA. So if we were to execute our GEXQ, which we can use from the blue check mark here in the ribbon, we see 352. So this GEXQ is telling us we have 352 records for country USA. Well, we could verify that here in the QueryDesigner. If we go ahead and run for all records, notice up here at the top where it says query retrieved, we have our 352. So we're seeing that count in our case for our GEXQ that we created on product name. I'm going to save our query. So GEXQs, one thing to note as well, not only do you have to turn it on in your query, you also need to have an alias on the field. If your auto aliases are not enabled, it's pretty easy to do that. We can go to our view ribbon at the top in the QueryDesigner, go under settings, and the second checkbox, auto alias fields. So if you check that box and say OK, then as you add fields into your query, they will automatically be given an alias. We're in an Access database here, Northwind, so you notice the aliases are in brackets, and they are not set in stone. You can always change them. So you can just right-click, go to alias, and then make a change right there. If you don't have auto alias turned on, you can always go to a field, right-click, go to alias as well, and give it an alias. But auto alias is nice. That way, you at least have something. Say you have a query that you built, you added a GEXQ, and then while you're in Excel, you're like, hey, I want a different GEXQ in another field. If you have auto alias turned on, you actually can select any of those fields that are within your query. Okay. All right, so we're going to save our query. We're going to go back into Excel and see how to actually bring in that value, as we saw here, 352 in this case because we had USA, into Excel. All right. So we're just going to create a label here in B4. It's going to say count of invoices. Column a little bit wider. And before bringing in our query, we need to refresh our queries because we made a change to it. All right, so in C4, we're going to open up our Formula Assistant. This time, we want GEXQ, the first of that bottom section there. We're going to find our invoices query, and we have some options here. Total field, so which field do we want to use to have a GEXQ on? I'm just going to use our product name again, and total type. So we're going to count because we want to see how many records we have. We see that country parameter once again, and just as before, we're going to use the cell of C3. Then we can insert. We come back to country and use our drill down and select USA. We notice count of invoices changes to 352. Now if we want to see what records make up that 352, we can select our formula here in C4, go to drill down, and in our drill down window, we have the 352 records, the same ones that we saw while in the QueryDesigner, listed out here in the drill down window. Okay. Now let's say we also wanted to see the total amount of invoices. So total invoice amount. So if we wanted a sum of what those invoices were, we can go to C5, open up our formula assistant. Once again, go to GEXQ because we want a single value. We're going to find that same invoices query. This time for total field, we're going to select extended price, and we want to sum. Okay, that country parameter once again, so we're going to keep it with C3. Then we can insert. We can see our total amount here, and since it is a dollar amount, I would like it shown as dollars. That makes a little more sense there. So if we change our country that we're looking at, say we go to Canada this time. Select Canada from the GEXS and insert. You see Canada, 75 records, and then 50,196 for the total of invoices. Now if we wanted to verify that invoice amount, we can always drill down. And this time we're going to go to groups and subtotals at the bottom here, and then turn on our sum footers. So if we look at our extended price column, down here at the bottom, you see that same value that we see here in cell C5. And at the top, we also see how many records we retrieved. So if we drill down on C4 or C5, we will have the exact same drill down window with the same results. That's because it's the same query being ran on the back end, and we have that parameter of Canada being pushed through. So also here in our formula assistant, notice where we have the parameters for country, and we're entering in the value here for C3. You can always use Excel anchoring here as well. So say we wanted to do an absolute, make sure that, if we were to copy our formula over, that, we were still looking at Canada, you could always use the absolute $C, $3. So we're going to use cell C3. If you want to make sure that it always uses column C, you would then just use $C and then 3. And in our case here, if we always wanted to use row 3, so if we were dragging over our formula, we could use C $3. Okay, so all that anchoring, does work here in the results container. Okay, so we have our GEXS and B3, output going to C3. C3 is our parameter that feeds into our GEXD, which is on our other sheet, that populates our orders TBL table here at the bottom. And then our parameter in C3 also feeds into our GEXQs that are listed here in C4 and C5. Okay. Then back in our GEXQ query, we talked about turning on the GEXQ by right-clicking on the field, selecting GEXQ summary field. We saved it. Then any field that has an alias, you can create GEXQs on once you actually go into Excel. So that's how we were able to create the additional one here of total invoice amount, is because we already had an alias on our extended price. Any questions on the GEXQs at this point, or GEXSs?
We do have one question. It's, how do I enable Formula Assistant?
Okay, so if you look at your ribbon, your Spreadsheet server ribbon here at the top, and if you notice Formula Assistant's grayed out, Build a Template's grayed out, that's an indication that you only have a limited license. So if you have a limited license, you won't be able to actually create what we've done here in Excel, but you can always use what we have in Excel. So if you have limited, you could just do what we did here in B3. You could drill down, you could select your country, and your reports would run. You just can't come in here and create them. So if you need to create, like we've seen here in Excel, you would need a gold license for that. And then to add to that, if you have a limited license and you need to use Query, which we're using throughout this entire sheet here, you need to make sure that you have the limited license with query. So if you need to figure out what licensing you have, you probably want to get with your representative and talk with them and see what you have, what you need, and they can get that figured out for you.
You bet. And just as a side note, we will be listing the different contacts on the customer success team at the end of this webinar. So we'll have all of the contact information. If you do have questions regarding your license types, we are happy to help you with that and determine to make sure that you've got the correct license type for what you need to do within Spreadsheet Server. We do have another question that has come in, and this is a basic one, but still I think it's important to touch on. Can we use column A and row 1 when building the formulas?
Most definitely. I just picked cell B3 so we weren't totally on the edge here. If you wanted to do that, like we can just get rid of column A, and we can get rid of rows 1 and 2. And notice since we are using Excel here, our formulas have automatically updated as well. Okay? And if we go back to our formula sheet, we notice it moved as well too. So you can always move things around, and there's no reason why you can't use any specific column or row. It's just a matter of preference. A lot of times, too, users like to leave some space for, say, company logos or more header information for their reports.
Okay, great. Another question has come in. Does the GEXD formula automatically update when the parameter is changed without having to generate reports?
Yes, GEXDs do automatically update. So if we go back, in this case now, if we're in A1, and we go to drill down, we select, let's pick France, and insert. Notice B2 and B3 automatically updated. However, your table down here at the bottom did not, because for that we just need to generate reports. There we go.
We have another question that's come in, and this one's actually for GEXS formula. But does the user have to hit the drill down button to use the GEXS formula, or is there a way to automate this for a user who's not very familiar with Spreadsheet Server?
Very good question here. We actually could create an Excel button that would mimic the exact same function here of using drill down in A1. So if we wanted to take a look at that, we would go into the developer ribbon, and we're going to use insert. And notice there's two types here. We have form controls and ActiveX controls. We're going to focus on ActiveX and just select the command button, so that first rectangle button there on the left. Then we can come down into our Excel sheet and draw our button. Command button 1, that's not very helpful for our users here. If we want to change what that says, we can go to our properties, change the caption from command button 1 to, let's just call it country. Not getting too creative today. All right, and we have country as our caption. And the next thing we need to do is actually put some code behind our button. So if we right-click and go to View Code, we now see the VBA code, which is a Visual Basic code for our button. So right here at the top where it says command button 1 _ click, this is saying when I click my button, what's going to happen? Well, the first thing we're going to have to do is we're going to have to select our formula, which is in cell A1 now. So we're just going to write the line of range, open parenthesis, double quote. We said cell was A1, double quote, close parenthesis, dot select. And the next line, we're going to tell it what to do after we select it. So we're going to say application.run, and then drill down norm. So we just wanted to run the normal drill down function. And to go along with this, we actually can add another line, application.run, double quote, and say we want our table to update as well. So if we say SS GEN all query detail, that's just the command to say the exact same thing as if we were to hit the top half of generate reports. So it's going to run all of our GEXDs for us. So we have drill down norm that goes with our GEXS, and SS general query detail that's going to run our GEXD. We're going to save our code here. All right. And we need to make sure that it is macro enabled. We're just going to save to the desktop. Call it. All right. So if we go back into Excel, we're still in design mode. If we click design mode one time, notice the little circles are going to go off of our button. We can click our country button, and let's go with Germany. We're going to insert Germany. GEXQs are automatically updated. And then our table down at the bottom, our GEXD, is also ran as well. So this button now takes out two manual options, or two manual steps we were doing. We were going to A1, drilling down, selecting our country, or countries, and then we were having to use generate reports. So now this button is going to do both for us. It's a lot more user-friendly.
Great, thank you. And for any of you that might have joined a little bit late, please note that this is being recorded, so if you need to review this, we will have the information available to the customer portal in 7 to 10 business days. That way, if you want to review that a little slower, we're happy to make it available.
Is there any other questions?
We did have a question come in. How do I get my queries to show up under the lookup?
Okay, so if you want your query to show up under lookup, that's where we save them to the Explore folder. So if we go back into our QueryDesigner, so we would go to Purple Globe, Save As, go to the Main Queries folder, and then go to Explore, and you would save it there. So anything that's saved there, in our case we have countries, and in the sample of the Northwind companies are right there. So in Excel, under Lookup, there's the issue that we have. So we're going to move on to our final formula here. We have our GEXI. GEXI is going to be a on-demand query. These types of queries are nice if it's information that you sometimes need, but you don't need in your regular table output. So say we wanted more information about our product ID, which in our case here we have in column F. So if we wanted to find out what is product ID 1, how many do we have, where is it coming from, we actually can create a query that would give us all of that information, and then we could see the results of that query right here from our table. So we could create a query in the QueryDesigner, pull it into the GEXI, and then we could put that GEXI in column I, and then we could drill down and see the results. So if we want to take a peek at what that query could look like, we're going to use the product supplier query. So it's going to give us more information about our products and our suppliers. We have our product ID, which is our parameter value as well. So we have test value here of 5. And then we have some other supporting information. As I mentioned earlier, how many units do we have in stock, how many is on order, where is it coming from. Where is it coming from is nice. Like I said, there's a weather event or whatever it may be. You can always see if it's going to affect any of your products here. So if we wanted to see what the results look like, we can run for all with our test value of 5. We have our single line. Okay. So to see this in Excel, remember this is going to be additional information about our product ID that we have in column F. We're going to go to I9, that's our first row of data. Open up our formula assistant. And we're going to select our final formula here at the bottom, GEXI. We're going to find that product supplier query. Right here we see it's asking for our product ID. So in our first row, F9 is our first product ID. So we're just going to put F9 and then insert. Notice when it inserts, we see 3 question marks. This is where we can drill down and get more information. So here we have product 54, more information about it. Since this is a regular Excel table, that formula that we had in row 9 did fill in the entire column. We can call it product info here. And just as with the rest of our table, if we go and run for a different country or countries, this column is also going to be updated as well. So let's use our nice little button here, and let's run for Brazil. And let's pick the second row here. So product ID is 61. If we wanted to see what that is and where it's coming from. There we go. The GEXI, the default is for the 3 question marks to show up in Excel. If you decide you'd rather it say the words drill down here, more info, whatever it may be, that can be changed within the application configurator, but it is a universal change, so it'll be changed for all of your users. So it's one thing you might want to discuss before changing, or if you're still in testing phases, you go ahead and change it, and then when you roll it out, just let them know, hey, if you have a GEXI, this is what's going to show up in the window, or in the cell. And then to see the detail, we just drill down. All right. So with our GEXI, if we wanted to actually be able to access this query from the ribbon under the query section, we can do that. If we go back into our product supplier query, there's an option here on the ribbon that says available on ribbon. We check that box and say save query. We can go back into Excel, refresh our queries. Now under the query section, we have our product supplier query. We click it. We'll notice a little slide out over here on the right-hand side, a nice little panel here. We could put in a product ID we're inquiring about. Say we want product ID 21. We could do that and then execute. And we have our drill down window for product ID 21. So when you add a query to have it available on the ribbon, you're adding the functionality for your users to actually be able to use your query as a slide out option on the right-hand side and see the results in a drill down window. So this isn't actually a part of your workbook, it's just a nice little lookup for your users. So say they're on a different report and they want to see, hey, how many product ID 54s do I have in stock? You could type in 54 and execute. All right, we have 21 in stock, 0 on order. So, you know, that's how you could use it right there. Okay. Have any questions come in?
We do have one question that's come in, and this will also tie into license types. This question is a GEXI formula available to limited users or only gold users?
All right, so you have to be a gold user, of course, to actually put it into the report. But if you have limited with query as your license, then you'll be able to utilize the GEXIs that we have here, for example, in column I.
Perfect. And again, if you've got questions on licensing, you can always contact your customer success executive and they can point you in the right direction. If there's additional functionality that you need, they can always assist you in getting the right license type for you. We've had another question come in asking where they can find the list of tables.
All right, list of tables. So if we go, let's just close out of this query. And we're just going to say test. We're using Northwind here. We say OK. Once you go to create a new query in the QueryDesigner, after you give it a name, as you just saw there, you then see your tables. So in our case, we're in the Northwind connection. We only have 19 tables, very small data set there. And this is where all the tables are listed out. So what you see is going to be dependent on what you have access to.
Great, thank you.
Welcome.
had one other question come in, and this is regarding GEXS, and it basically is the purpose of a GEXS just to give a drop-down list?
Yes, however, this is also going to give your users a selection of what they can choose from. So, there's less of a chance of misspellings, because when you're using in our case here, country as your parameter, if you were to misspell Argentina, you're going to get 0 results. Versus if you have a selector window and you actually select Argentina, you're going to get results that are actually there. So it helps with spelling and then making sure that you're just picking valid options. So it's more or less to keep it easier for your users.
Makes sense to me. I believe this is all of the questions that we've had come in.
Okay.
Was there any additional information, Rebecca, that we needed to share for this session?
Just one thing real quick. We can just use the example that we have here. We have our table that's coming in, and then we have our GEXI that's in the last column there. If we had a name range instead of a table, which we can just locate down here at the bottom, we can mimic the same thing as our table automatically filling in our formula here by using the fill down column option within a GEXD. So if we want to take a peek at that, we can create a name range, and we're just going to call it orders info. All right. We can create another GEXD right here. We have our orders, sheet 1, orders info, include column headings, clear sheet. And notice right here to the right of starting cell range table, we have the option for fill down columns. So we're just going to put 1 on there. And then we have the same country. So we're at sheet 1, and then we were in B1. Okay, double check on our name range there, orders info. Looks good, it's pulling in our country. We can use our button to start this off. Pick Canada. All right, so we have our name range. In this case, it's pulling in the same thing we saw in our table. And if we want to use our GEXI, give it our header, our info. We have our GEXI formula, which was our product supplier. Once again, asking for that first product ID, which is F87. Insert. So if we were to go and run again, we notice down here at the bottom, since we're using a fill down column, it kept our formula for our GEXI, and as our table populated, it also filled it in. So using the fill down column, that's going to mimic the Excel functionality of filling in the column when you just insert the formula. So if you're using a name range, just keep in mind that that's when you're going to need to use the option here for fill down columns. So in our case, we just use the GEXI. This option can also be used, if you have Excel formulas or whatever else that you need to do. You can just tell how many columns past your data you want to fill in like you would in an Excel table. Okay. Were there any other questions that came in?
No, I think all of the questions that have come in have been answered.
Oh, perfect.
Okay, well, thank you everyone for joining us today, and thank you, Rebecca, for an insightful session. We appreciate your time, And we hope that our Query Designer Back to Basics webinars have been helpful. Again, this is session 3 of the 3-part series. A list of your customer success executives are now displayed along with their email addresses for any questions regarding Spreadsheet Server and Query Designer. If you have questions regarding your license types, you can also email your customer success executive. If you aren't sure who your contact is, please send an email to our generic mailbox at customersuccess@globalsoftwareinc.com. We truly appreciate your time today and thank you for your business and your partnership. Have a great afternoon.